All right. Check on Twitch. That is live. Wait. And YouTube is live.
Yeah, it is.
Sweet.
We're live with episode 94 of the Chall Podcast. Come say hi on Twitch and or YouTube.
I will tweet or I'll retweet. All right. Let me fix this real quick.
God, her ex liked my tweet.
You should tune in. All right, you ready to get started?
Yeah.
Hello and welcome to episode 94 of the Ego Chall Podcast. My name is Preston Byers, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Justin Binkowski. And on today's episode, we finally have some news about the next Call of Duty League season, the season that Bink refuses to call the 23-24 CDL season, even though that is actually accurate. We also have some Call of Duty roster rumors. We're back at the rumor mill because not much else has been confirmed, but we'll be talking about some COD roster rumors later on in the show. But before we get to any of that, how are you doing, Bink?
I'm doing well. Like you said, it's about time we finally got some news on the actual season, so I'm excited to dive right into that. And yeah, we seem like we've been talking about rosters for a while now. We're finally, well, shouldn't say finally, but we're getting some details about potential rosters now for the last couple of teams, even though one franchise we still don't really know what's going on.
Yeah. But before we get to the actual rosters, let's get into the season details that were revealed late last week. So it was, I forget my tweet off the top of my head. It was 130 plus days from the end of the 2023 Call of Duty League Championship to the actual announcement of the 2024 season details. And we now have most, but not all, of the details about what's going to happen this coming year in the CDL. What we do know is that there will be 4 majors, one less than we had last season. 4 majors, each hosted by a different CDL team. The first major will be in Boston, very cold Boston, in January. That will be the first major of the year. The second major will be hosted by the Miami Heretics, of course, a new addition to the CDL as the rebranded Mutineers. Major 3 will be the Toronto Ultras LAN tournament. And then Major 4, the fourth and final major of the season, will be in Carolina, North Carolina, I believe, in Charlotte. And that will be hosted by the Carolina Royal Ravens, of course, a rebranded team for this year as well, after relocating from London to North Carolina. We don't know the official date or the official location of the CDL championship, although Dexerto has reported that Dallas is being targeted as the location and that it would reportedly be held in the American Airlines Center, I believe. I always get them confused because when I watched the NBA, when the Heat and the Mavericks played in 2011 in the finals, One had the American Airlines Arena and one had the American Airlines Center. I believe Dallas has the American Airlines Center. So that's the home of the Dallas Mavericks. I think it's like 19,000 seat arena. So that is being targeted as the potential champs arena venue. But again, that is unconfirmed. And what we also know is that there will be more online qualifier matches for each specific major this season compared to last season. So last year, I believe it was 5 qualifying matches, except the first major, which was 4, and then that there were only 2 weeks of qualifiers at that point. But this time there will be 7 qualifying matches before each major, making 28 total qualifying matches for each team. I think I got pretty much all the big details, and we can kind of go down the list, and I'll look through the CDL website to see if I missed anything. But Bink, I want to kind of angle it like this. Do you think this season schedule, the 2024 season schedule, or in the details that we know about it, do you think that's better, the same, or worse than what we had in 2023?
I think there's multiple ways we can look at it. The big thing right off the bat is that the first LAN is going to be taking place a month later than this past season. So Raleigh Major 1 in 2023 took place in December, I think the beginning of December, like before Christmas. So it's almost like 6 weeks later start technically. If you do the qualifiers, I think it was like 2 weeks before that, so it might just be a slighter delay for the start of qualifiers this year compared to last. But definitely the date of the first event is a little more delayed. So not really sure how to feel about that. We've talked about it on the podcast a little bit. Leading up to this, in the sense that there was such a strong push last season for the league to start earlier or closer to the launch, the actual game. And I felt like they did a good job of that last year, because we've said multiple times now, you can't start it like the weekend of MW3's release or the weekend of the new COD game's release. That's just illogical and would have so many issues with, map set, rule set, broken guns, etc. So giving the players some time to try and test some of that out before an actual event happens is the most ideal. The question just becomes, how much time do we want to give the players, or how much time does the league want to give the players to adjust and figure that stuff out? And I felt like last year did a good job of starting almost as close to the launch as possible. You could argue it might have been able to do it a little bit sooner. I don't know the exact dates off the top of my head of last year's launch and the Raleigh event to kick off the year, but it might have been able to do it a little bit faster. But this year is definitely later, and the first event is coming almost 2 months after the launch of MW3. So that is definitely, I think, a little worse than last year. But at the same time, if this slighter delay in the start is for the benefit of the game to give us the best overall product, then I'm okay with that, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what we want. We want to see the best version of the game being played, and if having this little bit of a longer delay to the start of the season provides that, then I'm all for that. But if it's just because of scheduling issues or whatever, then that's obviously kind of a red flag in my book in comparison to last year. At the same time, I do think the increase in qualifiers is interesting. There's been a lot of talk about the importance of online COD in previous years, and trying to minimize just the impact of online Call of Duty versus LAN. So I think on a side note with that, I think the increase in points earned on LAN versus the online matches is definitely a positive. But the increase in online matches in terms of qualifiers I can see as both a positive and a negative. At the end of the day, more matches for qualifiers means there's going to be less of those ties, and if you're playing 7 matches versus 5, you would think more often than not that an increased sample size would have the better team playing a little bit more and being able to showcase what they're capable of, and it should be a little bit easier to determine who are the better teams heading into each event because some teams will struggle, but in the past we've had teams like LA Thieves go 0-5 in the qualifier and then go to second place. I think that was literally Boston last year. If they're playing those 7 matches, 0-5 and 0-7 is kind of a big difference in my eyes, at least just in terms of 0-5 obviously isn't good at all, but 0-7 is just that much worse. Like you had 2 more opportunities to win and try and turn things around and you just weren't able to. So, I think the qualifiers, obviously, more online COD isn't a good thing in my eyes, but if it's allowing us to, uh, I'm having a hard time wording what I'm trying to say here. I know how I want to say it, but I can't think of it. Getting that, just that increased sample size of the teams leading up into the LAN with the increased LAN points. I think that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out. And I think at the end of the day, it should result in what everybody truly wants, and that's just the best teams are able to showcase on LAN more consistently what they're capable of. We still, as far as I know, could run into the issue though of teams showing up to LAN only playing 3 maps, getting 0-3 swept, and then they're eliminated. So I think there's been some talk in the community about that. I think maybe you tweeted something about all the teams starting in winners bracket or something along those lines. Obviously, that's not an official change or anything like that, but that's going to be something that we've talked about before and could have our eyes on this year with the format as well. But yeah, overall, I think just obviously one less major for the schedule overall, I think is an interesting decision. The way the schedule breaks down, I guess it kind of makes sense unless they were to extend the season beyond what we had last year. But no pro-am and no kickoff classic and that stuff I think is a positive. Nobody really cared about those tournaments anyway, and I kind of just delayed the season, or especially the one in the middle. I think that was the pro-am classic. It was kind of just a meaningless event thrown in the middle that a lot of people just didn't care about, and that kind of just added to the length of the wait before meaningful events took place. So I think that's interesting only 4 lands, but it definitely, I think it is positive that we're adding a couple qualifiers in terms of what that potentially means for the setup of the teams heading into LAN, and then definitely I'm a huge fan of the increased points at LAN.
Yeah, so there's a few things. One, so 2 years ago we had that was the midseason pro-am, and that was in Columbus, no fans. Last year we had the pro-am as the major one, and it was kind of tied into the actual major and everything, and that was a weird tournament because you had a mini group play with these teams, or the challengers teams were trying to qualify for the mini group play, and then you had mini group play, and then that would turn into bracket play. So that was weird. But I'm a big opponent of getting rid of the pro-am just because I think it gave challengers players a goal, something out there that they could prove themselves in. And we even saw it last year with the LAG Academy team. They outplaced LAG in that first major, the pro-am major, and the bulk of that lineup ended up replacing the LAG lineup after major 1. So I think that that's a big mistake in my opinion that the CDL is making of just getting rid of something that challengers players looked forward to, and they could kind of prove themselves against CDL players outside of maybe scrims, which aren't obviously made public very often, or whatever GBs or whatever, these unofficial matches. So I'm not a big fan of that. As far as the scheduling goes, so last year, like I said, we had 2 weeks before the first major, and there were only 4 qualifying matches, and then there were 3 weeks before every other major for 5 total matches online. Now we have 4 weeks of qualifying matches. Each team plays 7. I don't necessarily think that's the worst thing in the world, because if this was the same but we had that 5th major and we had a pro-am classic, then I'm kind of okay, we're just getting more COD essentially. It's not that big of a deal. But it does seem that we are actually sacrificing that 5th major for additional online matches, which, like you said, I don't need more online COD. The players don't need more online Call of Duty. And, I just don't think it's the right way to go. I wonder if, we had heard that rumor about the CDL possibly kicking off the season at DreamHack Atlanta. And that is, I think, a week before Christmas. I think that would have been the perfect place to kick off the season, or that time period would have been the perfect place, because that's actually what happened last year, not at DreamHack Atlanta, but that the timing of it. The season started a week earlier last season than it will start this season. So I think it was 6 days, but essentially one weekend ahead. And that weekend makes a big difference, in my opinion, just because that gave them 2 weeks before the first major. So it wasn't 1 week, because I think people would have had a problem with only doing like 1 week of qualifying matches and then going right into the major. Even though I think that would be, I suggested on Twitter that they just start the season with a major. Like, I don't really care that much. Like, I think a LAN to kick off the season is better, in my opinion, than starting it with like 4 weeks of online matches. I think that kind of takes away a little bit of the steam. That's just, again, my opinion. But last year you had that 2 weeks before. I don't think that they could have fitted in with the season starting a week later. Of course, and I think they probably could have started this upcoming season a week sooner, so that's not actually an issue, and they would have been able to figure out some of the logistics of it. But again, we don't know how valid of a rumor that was, that they would start at DreamHack Atlanta, but that would have been a good time, because then you could have had that 5th major. You could have made that the Pro-Am or whatever. You could have done whatever you wanted with it, but then we could have had an additional major, and then we could have Boston host their own major in January and kind of go from there. So that's kind of my piece on that. As far as just like the majors in general, I like you mentioned that I had suggested something, and but before I bring that up, I want to say that Jacob Hale, he tweeted about the most number of matches that a team could play this season, including champs, and the least number of matches a team could play on LAN, I believe. No, not on LAN. This is just in total. So this season, the fewest number of matches they could play is 32, which is 2 more than they would have played last year. And that's accounting for getting getting first rounded, starting in the losers bracket, all that. And the most that they could play this season, including champs, so that would be literally like starting in the winners bracket, losing that first winners bracket match, and then taking an entire run through the losers bracket to the final. The most they could play is 62, which is 5 fewer than they could have played last year, according to my calculations. I'm not saying that's like a hard and fast rule, but that it's essentially taking away 1 major, essentially, because there is only 4 this year, and then you have champs. Last year we had 5 majors and champs, and that first major you could technically play 13 matches instead of the 12 matches at all the other majors. Okay, my actual point though is my suggestion that you referenced. I tweeted, it won't happen, but all 12 teams should start in the winners bracket at majors. Top 4 seeds get a first round bye. The 4 winners bracket round 1 losers go to the lower bracket and play elimination matches against each other. And then the rest of the tournament is essentially the same as what we had last year. I said, this could double the number of LAN matches a poorly performing team would play and avoid flying to a major to play 1 series. I could see some top seeds complaining that their lower seeded opponents get a match on LAN before them, though. And that is kind of the drawback of this, and also the logistics of it, of having 4, or I think it would probably be 6 more matches than we usually would get, because it's essentially that winners bracket round 1 is the extra part of it, and the losers bracket round 1 is the extra part of it. So I don't know if the CDL could handle doing 6 more matches for every major, but I think it's the right move. It's like, I'm quite certain that this isn't going to happen. I don't think the CDL has proven to be incredibly flexible with their lands and their major schedules. And I understand kind of like how much stress that could put on them to do 6 more matches, which is, a significant amount when you're, looking at the grand scheme of things. But that, like I said, if you got double first rounded, or excuse me, if you get first rounded at every single major, you've played 4 land matches this season, because you're probably not going to make it champs, I would imagine. So 4 land matches. In this scenario, if you take what I said, then you at least played 8. You played 8, which is double. That's, it's still not a lot. Like 8 matches on land is really not very much, but still, like, that's way more. That's a lot of practice. That's a lot of experience that you can gain from that. I don't. Did you like that idea of 12 teams, all 12 teams starting in the winners bracket, and then we can kind of sort it out from there? Or do you have any other suggestion or any other thoughts about how the majors should go to kind of like maximize how much teams are playing on land versus online?
So I don't want to give a non-answer, but I do think that all 12 teams in winners bracket might not be as rewarding for like those top teams. Like if a team goes 7-0 and they still have to play a first round match and like they're in first and they have to play the 12th place team, like you can look at it as like it's almost like a bye, but they still have to actually play that match, and anything can happen on COD on any given day. So then they could get upset. So I don't know how I feel about all 12 in winners bracket to start. I do definitely agree though that we've talked about it before, that just having a team go out to a tournament, lose 3 maps, and then literally just be eliminated, and that's their entire weekend on land, that just doesn't seem right to me. So finding some way, maybe it's like they do like the 9 versus 10 in winners bracket, and 11 versus or 9 versus 12 and 10 versus 11, and then those 2 teams go into the winners bracket or something like that. I don't know how exactly it would work out with an actual bracket. But I agree and disagree to the extent that I think finding a way to, kind of avoid those situations where teams just go out and get immediately bodied right away on land and don't get to play anymore after that is less than ideal. But at the same time, I do feel like that wouldn't be as rewarding to a team if they performed exceptionally well, get first place in that land. And then we're talking about the reverse of that, right? Like let's just say Optic goes 7-0 in the online qualifiers. They play 12th place Vegas, who goes 0-7, and then Vegas somehow 3-0s them on land in the first match, and then Optics in the loser bracket to start the tournament. Like that's kind of cool narrative wise. Like, and it might be a little fluky though. So I don't know. Then it would raise questions about online COD and all this. So yeah, I feel like it's kind of like a circle here, and there's no true right answer. But I would definitely be open to any potential ideas like the one that you suggested. I just don't know what the correct answer is or the best solution would be.
Yeah. So what I'm thinking with this is the way you could change it to essentially create an inherent advantage for the top 4 teams, because the top 4 teams get their bye, and then it's the 5 through 12 that have to play like an extra match. So the top 4 teams, they get their first round bye. They're waiting essentially for the other teams to finish their matches. And like you can't really do like a 5 versus a 12. Like you can do that match, but like the 5 versus 12 can't then advance to like the first seed, because then it's like, well, that first seed's getting screwed. They're playing probably a pretty good team if they're playing the 5th seed rather than playing the 12th seed. You know what I'm saying? Yeah. So what I think you could do is essentially those 4 teams, they get their bye, and then you have 5 versus 12, 6 versus 11, so on and so forth. Those teams do their matches, and then the first seed, they can either take the lowest seed, like the one of 2 options. You could take the lowest seed possible. So say the 10th seed wins and they're the lowest seed that's advancing into the winners bracket. They get that automatically. So the first seed gets to play the 10, or this would create a lot of drama, but the first seed gets their first selection, so they get to pick their opponent. So say the 12th seed upsets the 5th seed, And then Optic, who's at the first seed or whatever, they could be like, yeah, we want to play that team. Or if they think, well, that team, we don't match up very well with them. Like I'm thinking of like maybe FaZe versus Legion last year, where they had kind of overlapping strengths and weaknesses, where you don't really want that. Like, or maybe you do want that. But like the first or second seed, they could be like, oh, we want them. And then the second seed can be like, we want that team. The third seed can say, we want that team. And then the fourth seed just gets whatever's left of them. I think that would personally just be like interesting to see the strategy, because you can create storylines with that. And also you can really screw over some other teams in that. Like if the first seed takes an opponent, and then that leaves like, Atlanta FaZe, for example, they have to pick of these remaining 3 teams. And maybe that was the team that Optic picked. Maybe FaZe could have really benefited from that team as their opponent. Again, all speculation. It doesn't really matter, because I don't think any of this will actually happen. But I think that, like, I hope these are the conversations that are happening in the CDL, like where, whoever it is, and Daniel Say is like off the top of my head, just because I know that he is like the commissioner GM of the CDL. I hope someone like him and someone like Spence, they can like sit around and be like, whoa, what do you want to do about this? How about this? How about that? I just think like we should just try to be advancing the format. I don't think that happens every year, unfortunately. I think, like, I don't think that the initial CDL format, if you remember their world tour, I don't know if that was probably the best idea, like the most realistic idea for the players. But like that was a way better format, in my opinion, than what we're getting now, just because everybody would have guaranteed to be playing LAN tournament or LAN matches. I guess they weren't tournaments. But like right now it's a lot of online, and there's very little LAN. You're going to have a month or more than a month between every LAN tournament. And if you're a fan of, I don't know, like say you're a fan of the Carolina Royal Ravens, maybe they won't be good, maybe they will. I don't know. But say they're not, and they start in the losers bracket and they lose round 1. All right, you saw one match. Okay, Major 2, they start in the losers bracket again. They lose that match. Okay, you've seen them play 2 LAN matches in 3 months. Like, that's just not exciting for me. I don't think that's really what fans want. But I understand, like, the financial implications of, like, they're not going to run LANs all that often, because I would assume it's not financially feasible. And I understand that, but it still sucks. One more thing that I wanted to add on this major stuff is are the teams that are hosting it. So like I said, 4 majors. Boston is hosting a major. They hosted the Boston major last year. You went there. It's going to be very cold because it is in January and it's Boston. But I'm happy that they stepped up again and they're hosting it. And I know that I think they wanted to host the major that ended up being in Columbus last year, if I'm not mistaken. They wanted like at least the opportunity to do that. And that was supposed to be in New York, and then it fell out for whatever reason. But I'm very glad that they seem very committed to being like supportive of Call of Duty, and that's awesome. The second major is in Miami, and that's great. Like I think people will be happy to not have to go to another cold city. Maybe Miami might not be the warmest in March, but it's kind of like a spring break event. So
it's warmer than Boston in January, I'll tell you that much.
we hope. I don't know, who knows with global warming, it could be negative 30 in Miami, but I think like the spring break aspect of it, and I think it was maybe Puckett was tweeting about it, like, it is like a spring break event because this is around the time that spring break would be for high school and college students, and to go down to Miami is kind of a cool at least visual and idea for a spring or a late winter, early spring event. And then we have Toronto again. I think that's awesome that we're going to Toronto. It's not going to be super cold, hopefully, in May. So maybe people will actually be able to enjoy it. And then the Carolina Royal Ravens are hosting the final major, and that's set for June. And again, like, it just sucks that the London Royal Ravens did not host a LAN. I don't think they technically hosted that one in 2019. I'm not completely sure, but we had a London event before the pandemic, and then we never got another one, and that feels like a massive missed opportunity. And I wonder why it's like I understand like it probably to move everything across the pond is essentially not very feasible sometimes for the league, but like it sucks that we didn't get another London event, but it's nice that people in North Carolina can enjoy this event. Of course, that we did have a CDL event in Raleigh last year, the first event, and this one will be in Charlotte. So at least we're getting two different cities. So but what I really wanted to say was no Los Angeles, no Seattle, no Texas. No, we're like Optic literally, or I don't know if it's Envy or Optic, but like the team, the organization, they own an esports arena. That's the whole thing. Like I think it's literally called the esports arena, and there's no event there this year. And like I understand that champs could be in Texas and Dallas, so like maybe you don't want to double up on that, but like the team that is probably most equipped to run a LAN event in their backyard is Optic/Envy, and they're not going to do that. That just seems really weird. Of course, not having one in New York, the biggest city in America, seems really weird. Like I said, LA, one of the biggest cities in America, not having one despite potentially having two teams. We don't even know if they actually have two teams at this point. Seattle, again, like, I mean, I think that would be a cool event. We had CWL Seattle years ago, and that was a very successful, very fun event. Trying to think of Minnesota would have been great. Especially if it was one of the later majors. Definitely don't want to. That's like another Boston if you end up starting the season in Minnesota. And I'm trying to think of any other teams that are not hosting LANs this year. Any off the top of your head that I'm missing? Optic, LA, Seattle, Toronto, Carolina, Boston, New York. Yeah, I was just listing off the teams. I think that's it.
Atlanta.
Oh, Vegas. Yeah, Vegas and Atlanta. Why couldn't we have that? Like both those teams. I mean, we had Vegas champs. I guess we know why the Legion wouldn't be hosting a major, but or we could assume why. But it would be cool if FaZe would. And who knows? Like now they're owned by Complexity or whatever. So that's weird. I don't think we talked about that. I don't know if you have anything else to talk about with the major or the majors and the schedule. Oh, one last thing. The points are different now. To essentially change because there are more online matches. They're actually making LAN matches worth more. So if you win a qualifier match, that's 10 points. That remains the same from last year. But now at major events, if you get first, it's 100 points. I believe it was 75 last year. Second is 75. Third is 60. Fourth is 45. And then fifth is 30 CDL points each. Seventh, 15 points each. And if you place ninth, I don't know how that works. Never mind. 9th through 12th. I was blanking. I was thinking of champs for some reason. But if you don't win a match, essentially, you don't get any points, as should be the case. Anything else that you wanted to talk about? If anywhere on the major calendar, on the season calendar, anything?
The only thing we seemingly skipped over in the announcements was Control was confirmed as the third mode. We had some discussions about potentially what could slot in there. It seems like they're just sticking with what they've known the last couple of years. So not much to talk about in that regard. We're just going to have to see how these old school maps play on a newer mode that wasn't around when those maps were around over a decade ago. So that'll be interesting, but yeah, definitely a fan of the increased points. It tells you too in the breakdown image how many points it was. So it was only 65 for first last year at a LAN because they added 35, and then second was 50. So there's only a 15-point difference between first and second. Now it's a 25-point difference. But still at that point, even just in comparison's sake, they're adding 20 points to third to make it 60. So third is now only 5 points less than what first got last year. So I think that's going to make it more rewarding for these teams that show up on land and actually get the job done and are able to capture the title at the end of the day, because 100 points is setting you up really well. Like you win major one, you're sitting pretty for the rest of the year. If we go to, oh, excuse me, where was I? I had a tab for the CDL website. Just trying to look. I don't remember what the exact cutoff was last year. That's what I'm trying to find. This is already for 2024. So 2023, postseason. This isn't giving me what I want. I just want to see the standings. Oh, regular season standings. Yeah, so eighth last year was 190 points. That was Boston and Seattle were tied at 190. So that's literally, you win two majors, you have more points guaranteed than the team that almost didn't make champs last year, right? So I think that illustrates just how meaningful these land matches are going to be in terms of points, and that's just what, going back to what we were talking about at the start of the show, that's what so many people have wanted over the years, is just they want more land cob, but they want it to mean more as well, because at the end of the day, land is more does a better job of representing what a team is capable of in the actual game on most cases. The only other thing I wanted to note real quick is just because when we were given our separate spiels at the beginning there, I was talking about the Pro-Am, and I kind of was mixing up the initial format from Vanguard in my head. I was thinking of that like mid-season Pro-Am event that didn't really mean as much, and I kind of just forgot that the first major last year had those Pro-Am teams. So I just want to say, I definitely liked that format last year. It would have been interesting because I went back and looked. Just to see how it did it. And LAG and LAG Academy got 9 through 12, so they had the same placing. But they only gave out CDL points to the top 10 or top 8 teams like they would in this case. But it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if, just for the sake of that example, if a Pro-Am team made it into the top 8, what would have happened to those CDL points? Because you can't give a Pro-Am team CDL points. That would just be silly. And then so you can't give those points to, like, if LAG and LAG Academy, just for the sake of an example, made 7th, 8th, you can't just like say, oh, LAG Academy can't get those 10 points, so now we have to give them to the other team. Like, that would be an interesting thing to see. It would throw a wrench into the format there, but I definitely do like that idea of some kind of way to get the pro-am and the amateur scene involved. In a Pro-Am style event, but I didn't like the mid-season meaningless Pro-Am event during Vanguard. So that's what I meant by that earlier in the show.
Yeah, I mean that mid-season Pro-Am was like the All-Star game in the NBA. It's like, all right, whatever. Like just move on. Like it just didn't really do anything. Like teams weren't really taking it that seriously. So, I think everybody is in agreement that last year's was way better. But you can't have nice things. Let's look at the rosters for the CDL real quick, because the CDL tweeted out a pretty handy image of the rosters that have been announced so far, and I've put it up on the screen. So if you're watching live on YouTube or Twitch, or if you're watching the VOD on YouTube, you'll be able to see. But we have Atlanta FaZe. They have 3 returning players: Abizi, Celium, Simp, with Draza coming in from LAT. The Boston Breach have Snoopy returning, and then 3 new players, because I put new in quotations because Capstone is returning from 2 seasons ago, and then Priesta and Slasher are coming in.
Even Snoopy as quote unquote returning is kind of, I mean,
veteran CDL player Snoopy.
Oh, don't get me started.
The Seattle Surge overhauled their entire roster: Abuza, Arstes, Illy, and Hook. The New York Subliners, the defending world champions, they're bringing back 3/4 of their roster. Of course, Priesta had the broken off contract negotiations in the offseason. He's with Boston, and they replaced Priesta with Sib, who's coming in from Seattle, and Sib will be teaming with Kismet, Hydra, and Skies. LAT all new roster, a new era of LAT essentially after winning the World Championship 2 years ago. Now they have Afro, Cammy, Ghosty, and Joe DeCeves. The Toronto Ultra are sticking with 3/4 of their roster, replacing only Hixie, who was a midseason pickup last year. So the roster is Kleenex, Envoy, Insight, and Scrap. Minnesota, completely new roster as well, bringing back Accuracy from a few seasons ago, and he'll be teaming with Lens, Awakening, and Vivid. Optic Texas, they're bringing back half of their roster, Shotzi and Dashi, and they will be teaming up with Pred and Kenny, forming another Optic super team. And then the Miami Heretics will be bringing back Vickle from last year's Florida Mutineers roster, and he will be teaming with the all-Spanish lineup of Journey, Lucky, and Meadows? Or is it Eric? Eric Boom is the sub that's looking for a team, right? Or
No,
is that
it's
Meadows?
Journey.
Okay, so it's Vickle, Lucky, Meadows, and Eric Boom. Whoever created this graphic should have said that.
I think I know who it might have been.
I didn't want to say. And then there are 3 teams that have no players signed, according to this graphic, which was updated as of October 28th. And that was the Carolina Royal Ravens, the Los Angeles Guerrillas, and the Vegas Legion. Pretty much the 3 teams that you would expect if if I told you in June at the end of Champs, hey, when it gets to November, which teams won't have officially signed anyone or announced that they've signed anyone? I think most people would probably be like Ravens, Guerrillas, Legion. That sounds about right to me. But yeah, that's what we're looking at so far for the rosters. But we do have some roster rumors, if I'm not mistaken. Let me pull up that tweet. The rumored roster for the Carolina Royal Ravens. We talked about it a few weeks ago. At the time, I believe we just talked about how Clayster. Did we talk about this at all with the Clayster Godorex Real team?
No, so okay. Last episode, the rumored roster was
I'm trying to think about
Clayster plus maybe Nero and Fame.
All right.
That was Crone's tweet on October 16th, according to CDL, Scrimmintel, JKL, and Tactical Rab.
All right. So yeah, so that was the rumored roster back then, but things seem to have changed, at least according to Jacob Hale this time. So right now it's looking like Clayster, Godorex, Rio, and Gwyn will be the Carolina Royal Ravens starting roster. That is according to Jacob Hale of Dexerto. He had reported on the 26th that it was going to be Clay, Godorex, and Rio, and that they were looking at Fame or Gwyn for that 4th spot. And then a few days later, he reported that Gwyn was now the top candidate for that final roster spot, which would be an interesting lineup. So let me get your thoughts on that. This potential roster, of course, not confirmed, but we're looking at Carolina being Clayster, who was on Vegas last year, Godorex, who has not been in the CDL since the 2020 Minnesota Rocker season, where they started off really good, and he looked like a potential MVP candidate at one point, and then they fell off the face of the earth, and he's been stuck in Challengers since then. Real is, I think you said he's 19 years old, right? And he's... Yeah, and he's a Spanish player. He was on the Minnesota Rocker Academy roster. He seems, pretty promising. That if a CDL team kind of looks at you and decides that you should be on their academy roster, even if that is a loose affiliation, technically, I think that does say a lot. And then Gwyn was the Seattle Surge's substitute for last year, although he did not make his CDL debut, as far as I know. So what do you think of this roster for Carolina?
I mean, the highlight of this roster for me is Godorex. We've talked about him multiple times now, several episodes, about that, that illustrious MW 2019 season where he was an MVP candidate first half of the year, and then season moves online, and things just kind of fell apart for the squad as a whole. And he just hasn't gotten his chance back in the CDL since then. So if this comes to fruition and he's actually getting that chance to return to the CDL. I'm really excited to see him back in the big leagues. Most notably, I think you mentioned it. He won the Challengers Champs last year, and he was teaming with Gwyn for that event. And before that, even as earlier as the part of the 2023 season, he was playing with
Got
Real.
Rex. Yeah.
Dr. X was playing with Real.
Yeah.
Before he was playing with Gwyn. So he has some chemistry with both of these. I gotta close out of this. God, GamePD is playing some ad in my headset. It's making me go crazy. So the point being that obviously I don't think Clay had played with GodRx before this. He would be the only one who had a chance to, but I would be excited about GodRx being back in the league, and I like the roster construction idea of having some of these challengers players who have prior experience and chemistry together, trying to bring what they did together in challengers up to the CDL. So I'd be excited to see how the squad performs. Obviously, they're getting a roster together late, so expectations aren't going to be as high for the squad. But I know how much you like Clay, and you know how highly I think of Clay as a player and a leader. So if anybody can make some magic work with a late put together team, I think that Carolina has a shot there. But that's definitely, if this report does turn out true and GodRx is back in the league, I'm going to be super happy for him and excited to see what he's able to do. And that narrative is definitely one I would be keeping an eye on to see, kind of like him getting his chance to finally prove whether that, start of the NW 2019 was legit, or anything surrounding that kind of, getting a fresh slate, I guess, is the best way to word it. And I would just be excited to see what he does with that chance, as well as guys like Gwyn and Real getting their first opportunities in the league, because, we like rookies, and always like to see how they pan out.
Yeah. I love that they're so, Real, and I mean, I hope we're saying it right. Like, I know in Spanish it's probably Real, but
yeah,
we're gringos, so we're probably not going to do that. And I'm sure the commentator's probably not going to get it right. But GodRx and Real, they played together in Challengers. Gwyn and GodRx played together in Challengers. So, like, there's the connection between those three, even if Real and Gwyn haven't played together on a team.
Yeah.
And then, Clay has played against GodRx, so maybe there is, a level of respect and maybe some familiarity there. I thought it was interesting, though, because GodRx is known as an AR player, and Clayster is obviously known as an AR player, that they might be constructing a 2 AR team again. I'm not sure what the roles are for Real or Gwyn, but
GodRx is definitely more of a flex. Okay. So I think that's, Clay main AR, GodRx flex, the other two on subs.
Then worse then. I don't.
As far as I'm concerned, at least, unless something changed recently.
Yeah. Well, either way, I think it's interesting. The meta in general is going to be something to watch really, really closely, especially early. Like, if we have less than a month from the launch of MW3 to the beginning of the online qualifiers for Major 1. So the game launches, I think, on the 10th, and then we have the 8th of December is the first day of online qualifiers for the CDL. So there's not really much time for these teams to figure out what's the preferred meta. Like, what are the best guns? We have all of these guns, right, from MW2 and MW3. That's correct.
I mean, yes, in the game. I don't know how that would work for comp, actually, though. I would assume they would.
I like that creates so many variables.
Yeah, they would probably GA the MW2 guns if I had to guess.
Yeah, because if there's like 120 guns, and obviously we had some of the preferred meta guns from last year, how they would translate to this game, like whether they're being tuned or balanced at all from MW2 to MW3, and then you have the ACR and the MP5 that was really good in the beta. Yeah, so like, I don't know, that's
or the UMP.
Yeah, that was the UMP. A lot of
Striker.
a lot of variables for that, and that'll just create a lot of chaos. Another rumored roster that we have here is again from Jacob Hale. He tweeted on the 27th that the Las Vegas Legion were, it's a possibility that Attach, Nero, Purge, and Standy would be the Legion's roster. So this is a weird team. Obviously, I don't know anything about Purge. I'm pretty sure he won Challengers Champs, but that's pretty much like the extent of my knowledge about him. And then Standy was, of course, part of this Legion roster at the end of the year with Clayster Temp and who am I forgetting now?
TJ.
And then Attach was on Minnesota. He was benched midseason, came back at the end of the year. And then Nero was with Boston and was also benched near the end of the year and then did not end up playing at Champs. I think he ended up competing in Challengers to finish the season. So this is like an interesting roster. I don't really know how they'll fit. There's obviously some familiarity with Standy and Attach, I would assume, considering they crossed over with Minnesota for one season, I think, Standy's rookie year, if I'm not mistaken. And Nero and Purge, I don't think there would be any crossover, at least in the CDL. But what do you have any thoughts on this potential Vegas Legion roster?
No, we kind of talked about it. So the original report last time we had the show, or the rumor, I should say, was that the roster was Attached, Standy, Mac, and Purge, and then obviously there was the development with Mac saying he's not competing. So now it's essentially Nero in for Mac, and that original rumor had Nero with Clayster in Carolina, so that kind of is, the domino if all of that is coming to fruition. So, I don't know much about Purge, honestly, but just going back to our meta conversation, I mean, obviously this is all speculation without knowing, what the game is going to ship like at launch, but the ACR was just so dominant in the beta. We could be looking at a 3 ACR or even a 2 ACR minimum on maps if it's just that good of a gun, but obviously we don't know what the other guns are going to be like that come out at launch, or if they actually nerf the ACR before launch from the beta. But I would be interested to see who's the second AR on this team. I don't know what role Purge played in the past, so if he is actually the flex, then that would maybe make the most sense. But Standy and Nero, to me, at least in their time in the CDL, have been those aggressive SMG players. So that's kind of an interesting sub duo. They both kind of have that, like, the pop-off potential. I think of Nero and Vanguard had a couple like 7 sprees or something that jump out to me. I can think of one on Tuscan where he just went absolutely off. But yeah, that sub duo would be interesting to me. But again, that's a really, I don't know what to make of saying quote unquote a sub duo when we don't know the meta. So I mean, it is what it is. I think we've talked about it enough. Building around Attach is just a smart idea from a leadership and a veteranship standpoint, as well as what he brings to the table as just a content creator and a face of COD esports. So same thing as Clay, building around Clay for Carolina. So makes sense in that regard. And then, like you said, that pre-existing relationship with Standy and the Minnesota Miracle they were able to pull off together. They've had some success, so banking on somehow bringing out the best of that on this Vegas team could be a possibility. But yeah, this is a team. If they're signed to this, if the signing becomes official, it's again a late off-season signing that I just don't have high expectations for, but could always be proved wrong.
Yeah. Before I forget it, I just wanted to mention that Clayster had said that he would consider retirement next year if he has to find a new team. I think he said like he still has the passion for it, but he doesn't really have the passion to kind of be a free agent every single offseason and figure out where he's going to play. And I would assume if he's going to be a part of the Royal Ravens roster, he's going to move from Texas to Carolina. That's obviously a pretty big move across the country. So I just wanted to mention that before I forgot. But let's get into some of these other rosters, these Challengers rosters. But before that, LAG, they are the only team that we haven't mentioned other than just saying pretty much like all of 2023, we've essentially said like, what's going on with LAG? I don't know. Seems weird, right? Like they laid off pretty much everybody that was involved in. So that was the Kroenke Sports Entertainment. The owners, they laid off pretty much everybody related to their esports operation, most of them at least. And LAG, and nobody's really commented publicly about that. And the team now, the Gorillas, they have not tweeted since June when they announced that their players were being allowed to explore other options. And of course, Aristides left the team. He's now with Seattle. Not sure what's going on with what's his name? Come on. Who signed a 3-year deal with them? Spart, thank you. Jesus. I'm just having a rough day.
We'll get to him in a minute.
But they haven't officially said anything about him. They didn't officially even say anything about Aristides leaving. It's just really weird. I think Marky B had said that he was exploring options and he was their coach and GM. Ricky announced that he was leaving and he was their team manager. So like what I have no idea what is I mean, like I have an idea of what might be going on, but like there's been no confirmation about whether this team is going to be even field a CDL roster in 2024. Like that's just something that should be like the CDO has to say something about this eventually. Like I don't know if they're working behind the scenes for another team to replace them, but like there's a very real possibility that we're only going to have 11 teams to start the CDL season, and I think the fans deserve to know what's going on with that. So that's just really, really weird, and I hope that gets solved sometime soon. Speaking of Spart, though, we can talk about him now. He is, according to CDC Intel, so the Challengers Intel account, he is reportedly teaming with believe the updated one is TJ, Proloot, and Spart. So Spart is teaming with Temp, Proloot, TJ. Oh my God, I'm having a stroke. Spart is teaming with Proloot, TJ, and Temp in Challengers. That's according to CDC Intel on Twitter. But a day earlier, it was Temp was going to team with Fellow, Neptune, and 2 Real in Challengers. If that isn't the most Challengers thing to ever happen, Temp just completely swapping teams. So yeah, the potential roster, of course, this is November 7th. This could change, I don't know, 1,100 times
literally tomorrow
before the launch. But Temp, TJ, Proloot, and Spart. Do you think this team is a pretty good one in Challengers? I mean, this is all former CDL players.
Yeah, I mean, we literally saw Temp, TJ, Proloot, and Clay play together in the CDL last year. So this is really just the beginning Vegas Legion roster with Spart in place of Clayster. So you would think they would be able to do well in Challengers, but we'll have to wait and see. The main thing for me I wanted to highlight with these two rosters is just like you were mentioning, that funny aspect of on November 6th, there was reportedly Temp, Fellow, Neptune, and 2 Real, and then literally a day later, it might have even been less than 24 hours, we get a report that it's potentially Temp, TJ, Proloot, and Spart. So I thought that was just really funny.
Yeah, I mean, the tweets were 5:01 on November 6th, and then literally like 17 hours later at noon on November 7th, completely different rosters. Love it. I mean, it's so Call of Duty, so Challengers.
And I think I saw now, Fellow said it's that same threesome with Major Maniac. 5 hours ago. He said our new fourth is Major Maniac and Coach Nagafin, who Nagafin, I think, was helping with Vegas last year at some points. Yeah. He's been someone since this franchising thing started that I really thought would be a good fit for a coaching role, just because he was a smart player when he was competing before the CDL days, really good at search. So I'm glad to see him stick into coaching and potentially could be kind of, if he has a good season and with this Challengers team as a coach, could maybe be like a next man up sort of deal for the coaching roster mania.
Yeah. A few more rumors, and I mean, some of these aren't rumors and more just like Challengers updates.
Yeah.
Assault, Brack, Exceed, and Havoc are teaming together as of now, or as of November 2nd. It could have changed since then, but they're teaming together in Challengers as well, of course, all former CDL players, and I think they're saying that Mayhem is going to be their coach for Challengers, and he was with Toronto and I believe LAG.
LAG. Yep.
Yeah, so he's so that's interesting. Again, a lot of experience.
I really like that team, assuming they stick again, like you said. Spoke very highly of Brack last year, and I think he might have got a little bit of an unfair shake if he's not able to, get another chance in the CDL this year, because the stats didn't lie. He definitely performed last year on an individual level. So preparing him with Assault, Exceed, and same with Havoc too. So it's basically two guys who were teaming on two different teams last year. I think this team has a really good shot to perform well in Challengers.
And another Challengers roster, Dave Patty, Uli, Rex, and Yeez. Rex is the only well, I don't know did Yeez ever make his CDL debut or was he always just a sub?
Might have subbed in, but I don't know actually.
I want to say that he never made it.
Yeah, I feel like I don't think he did.
But he's a substitute for Florida. Of course, Dave Patty was on Florida's roster. I think is it Yuli? Yuli was on London last year for part of the season, and then Rex, like I said, has been a Challengers player for a little bit now. I mean, like I never know what to really make of Challengers rosters, to be honest, because they change a lot, and like just because there are like big name talents on a Challengers roster, that doesn't really mean anything. Like everybody's got to have passion. Like I mean, they call it the passion pit for a reason. Like you have to really love COD and really want to be the best and like win, and you have to really work hard at it when you're in Challengers. So I mean, best of luck to this team, and hopefully they do well in Challengers, and hopefully they're able to get back up to the CDL, because I think it's kind of ridiculous that we're just like we have so much talent now in the CDL. The talent keeps getting better every year, in my opinion. Because like there just aren't very many opportunities, but the players have just been like competing against each other for so long that the competition just keeps rising and rising. But yeah, we actually might have one less team this year, which would make it even more pronounced how much talent there is in and outside the league. Did we have anything else that you wanted to talk about before we get out of here?
I just wanted to mention it because you were talking about Marky B earlier. We had the report or the rumor last episode that a EU super team in Challengers with Bance, Hixie, Beans, and Nasty was forming. I think that was just a rumor at the time, and then Hixie tweeted on October 29th that they'll be coached, that he kind of confirmed that roster and that they'll be coached by Marky B. And then Marky B tweeted on October 29th, it's an absolute embarrassment that no one in the squad is in the CDL, but regardless, I have no doubts that each player will prove everyone wrong. Excited to get to work. So essentially confirming that Marky B is no longer with LAG and is coaching this team. And this is my early favorite for the top team in all of Challengers. Obviously, that Assault, Brack, Exceed, and Havoc team is probably the best team on paper in NA Challengers, but this team should be overall. It would be very shocking to me if this team struggled in the European Challengers events, let alone all the Challengers events overall. There's so much talent on.
Is it confirmed that they're playing through Europe, or are they playing NA side?
I guess that's a good question. I shouldn't have assumed that, so I don't know for sure.
I thought I saw that they were EU Challengers like in one tweet, but I wasn't completely sure if I was.
Yeah, it doesn't say actually in Hixie's tweet, so I guess that is a good point.
Well, like either way, like I mean, I think it's just better for them to be in NA because then they could actually get signed up to another CDL team in the case that teams replace someone, which is gonna happen at some point in the season. But yeah, I agree with you. Like this is probably the best team. Like on like this and the Havoc team are just like it's an embarrassment of riches essentially for a challengers team, especially to have coaches like Marky B and Mayhem respectively for those teams that have CDL experience. They have like like I don't want to say like championship experience in terms of like COD champs, but like these are like championship pedigree types of coaches, and I think that could be very helpful for a challengers team because that's not something that every team in challengers actually has the benefit of like a high level coach that has the experience of like scouting other teams and game planning for other teams. So yeah, I mean that's incredible that literally the best EU COD player ever is playing in challengers right now, and it's not because he's like bad or anything. It's just kind of how things are in terms of how many good players there are, and kind of just like what teams are prioritizing, and Hixie as well, because he literally came into the roster for Toronto and helped them win a major, and then he's just not in the CDL this year to start, which is very weird. But yeah, that about does it for the show. Thank you for everybody who is watching the live stream either on YouTube or Twitch. We're live streaming on both at the moment. So if you want to join us for the next episode, look up Ego Chall Podcast on YouTube, or you can watch it on Twitch at twitch.tv/Ego Chall Podcast. And on our YouTube, we talked on our last episode, which is 2 weeks ago, that we had like 98 or 99 subscribers. And then I uploaded the video at like midnight. And then I woke up at 9 o'clock the next day, and I believe we are at 101, and we're still over 100 subscribers. So thank you very much to everyone that has subscribed to the YouTube channel and are watching and liking the videos or commenting. That is very much appreciated. We really, really loved to see that. And I'm just very thankful for that. We have a little fan base, or however many supporters we do have and that listen or watch. That's just awesome that you guys continually do that every single time we upload an episode. So yeah, thank you for that. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can. He's at jbink with 2Ks. I'm at Pres Byers, and the podcast Twitter is at Ego Chall Podcast. Not really sure when the next show will be. I think we probably would do one next week, just because we can talk about MW3 and kind of like our first, the first weekend impressions. And maybe we'll get some updates on the rosters, considering there are a lot of rumors swirling about Carolina and Vegas specifically.
Not even that. We should have some kickoff tournaments and stuff, so we could maybe infer some potential rosters based on who's playing together, especially like you mentioned, if we see those rumored Carolina and rumored Vegas rosters playing together in kickoff tournaments, that's kind of a good indication of whether or not those reports are true.
Yeah, and the meta will become a lot clearer through the first weekend. I mean,
more clear than it is in the sense that we don't have any idea now beyond the ACR being gross, but
we'll see if they're GAing literally like 70% of the guns first weekend, like upon launch, slashers like stamping GA, making sure that nobody can use the guns. But yeah, we'll probably have some idea of like who's playing together, maybe what people are using, if there are any touches to the ACR or the UMP. I would assume that they're going to be, but who knows? But yeah, we'll probably be back next week to talk about it. If you want to listen to the podcast rather than watch it, we are on Apple Podcasts, we're on Google Podcasts, Spotify. I think we're on Amazon Music. We're on like pretty much every podcasting platform. I've kind of got it down over the years of getting them all out in the different places, and I don't really do that. I made myself out to be like some like wizard. I literally upload it to one place and they put it out every other place. But if you want to listen to the podcast, you can do that in multiple different places. Enough of me rambling. I'm having a very hard time just speaking tonight, so I will turn it over to Bink.
Yep. Thank you guys as always for the support. And like Preston mentioned, thank you guys for 100 subs on YouTube. Definitely means a lot to both of us. And I know it means a lot to me. So really appreciate you guys support in any fashion that you're able to show it. For those who are buying or playing MW3 this weekend, hope everyone has a good time on launch weekend. Make sure to stay hydrated and get some sleep when you can. Although, maybe with the game compared to previous, launches and stuff, people might not want to play as much depending on the state of the game. But maybe that's a topic for next week, and we'll be able to see exactly how much I play over this launch weekend, and as well as other people. But I definitely am, since we kind of mentioned it, I am looking forward to some of these kickoff tournaments and seeing some of the squads getting their first action and the new game. So yeah, glad we finally had some season details to talk about, get into that point where we're in the real swing of things after a very lengthy off season. So as always, thank you guys again for the support, and remember to send the chat